Jason and I were the model couple in the eyes of others. From school uniforms to wedding dresses, we had been in love for 8 years, with our wedding approaching. As I delivered late-night snacks to him and pushed open the door to the private room at the bar he frequented, I heard his friend's voice. "Did you really use the money Vivian prepared for her dowry to buy a bag for someone else? That's 300,000 yuan, are you crazy? What if Vivian finds out?" Jason chuckled lightly, completely unconcerned. "She loves me to death. Back then, to gather startup capital for me, she even sold the heirlooms her father left her. Would she care about this little money? Besides, isn't this a test for her? To see if she truly loves me more than anything." Holding the thermos, I stood outside the door and silently turned to leave. On the wedding day, Jason's calls came in like death summons. "Vivian, where have you run off to? Our whole family is waiting for you." Looking at the familiar street view outside the window, I said, "I've already finished my honeymoon and gone home." On the other end, Jason's voice sounded like a jam tape. "Home? What home? Vivian, today is our wedding day, don't make such jokes." I chuckled lightly, the laughter in the receiver cold and unlike my own. "Jason, our home is gone." After saying that, I hung up, blocked him, and turned off the phone. All in one go. The phone screen dimmed, reflecting my calm, expressionless face. 8 years of relationship, like a joke. I once thought Jason was my whole world. From 16 to 24, the most important male figures in my life, besides my dad, were him. My dad passed away early. On his deathbed, he held my hand and said to find someone who truly cares for me in the future. At that time, looking at Jason beside me, I confidently told my dad that I had found him. Thinking back now, my dad's spirit in heaven must be furious with me, blowing his beard and glaring. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a gentle and familiar face. Ethan, my real estate agent, and the only one privy to this solo performance of mine. I remember the first time I contacted him was on that night when I discovered the truth. I sat in the convenience store, my voice uncontrollably trembling. He didn't pry, just listened quietly on the other end, then said in a steady voice, "Miss Vivian, don't be afraid, when dawn breaks, we'll find a home that belongs only to you. Miss Vivian, everything is taken care of." He handed me a set of keys and a brand new property deed. My name was printed alone on it, red and glaring, yet refreshingly satisfying. "Thank you for the trouble, Mr. Ethan. This is my job." Ethan adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses, his gaze falling on the suitcase behind me. "Do you need help?" He always spoke like this, restrained and distant, like a precisely running program. I shook my head. "No need, I want to start my new life on my own." He nodded, said no more, and turned to leave. I closed the door, leaned against the cold door panel, and let out a long breath. My chest felt empty, mourning 8 years of youth, yet relieved to have shed the shackles. This is my new home. A 120 square meter penthouse apartment with a huge terrace. I used the 300,000 that Jason took to buy a bag for Celine to pay the down payment here. Oh, no. That 300,000 was originally my money. I merely took back what belonged to me. Turning on the phone, countless missed calls and messages flooded in. Jason's, his mom's, his friends. I opened the last message he sent. "Vivian, where exactly are you? Are you crazy? Don't you want your dowry anymore? That 300,000, you don't want it?" Looking at this message, I laughed out loud. Even now, he thinks I only care about that 300,000. He doesn't know that what I truly care about is those 8 years of youth he personally crushed, and my heart that he trampled like garbage. Jason and I's wedding house was chosen together. From site selection to decoration, every detail poured in my effort. For the Mediterranean-style wallpaper, I visited over a dozen stores to find the one closest to my imagination. For the living room sofa, I sat on no less than 50 samples to select the most comfortable one. Even a spice jar in the kitchen had patterns hand-drawn by me. I once thought that place would be my warmest harbor for the next few decades. Recalling those days and nights devoted to love, now only a dull pain remains in my chest. Now, that harbor has become a joke. If Jason can't find me, he will surely go back to that home to wait for me. He will sit on the sofa I carefully selected, looking at everything I arranged, convinced that I can't leave him, can't leave that home where I poured all my heart. He waits for me to cry and go back begging for his forgiveness. The phone lit up with his message, "Wife, come back when your anger subsides, don't be willful." An hour later, "Vivian, have you made enough fuss?" 2 more hours passed, his tone becoming anxious, "Where exactly are you? Call back." At midnight, only a humble voice message remained, "Vivian, I was wrong, come back, okay?" His confidence was being crushed second by time. Just like in the past 8 years, every time we argued. No matter who was right or wrong, the one who bowed first was always me. Because he always said, "Vivian, you're so sensible, can't you just yield to me?" I was sensible. Sensible to the point that, for his startup, I took out the last inheritance my dad left me, that valuable ancient painting, and told him, "Take it and sell it, if the money isn't enough, I'll think of another way." At that time, he hugged me with red eyes, "Vivian, I will never betray you in this lifetime." Those vows still echo in my ears, and I once believed them to be true. I even recall in the early days of his startup, he forced me to entertain an important client. That client was fat-headed and big-eared, looking at me like dishes on a menu. His wandering hands accidentally landed on my shoulder several times, spouting vulgar jokes that made the whole table roar with laughter. I excused myself to the bathroom, hid in a stall, and called him, my voice trembling uncontrollably, "Jason, I'm scared, take me away." The other end was noisy with him and his friends' laughter. He lowered his voice, cold and impatient, "Vivian, this is also a test for you, to prove you love me and are willing to sacrifice for me. Just endure it, and it'll pass." I could even hear his friends jeering, "Jason, your little girlfriend is quite enduring, bet you win." At that moment, my stomach churned, worse than drinking 10 cups of strong liquor. But he could turn around and use the money I prepared for the dowry to please his white moonlight. That woman named Celine. She was our university's campus belle, surrounded by admirers, while I was just an utterly ordinary girl. Jason was once one of her many suitors. Later, Celine went abroad, and only then did Jason start pursuing me. At that time I foolishly thought he had truly discovered my good qualities. Now it seems, I was just his second-best choice. A cheap, obedient substitute who could give endlessly for him. The phone vibrated again, it was a message from an unknown number. "Vivian, this is Celine. Jason said you were so sensible and obedient before, I see it's nothing special. He's told me everything, stop making a fuss, that's enough. It's just a bag, is it worth it? It makes you seem very petty." I stared at the message, laughing in anger. What a just a bag. I replied to her, "That 300,000, will you return it yourself, or should I help by reporting to the police and letting them chat with you?" She replied instantly, "You dare." That was Jason voluntarily giving it to me. He gave it to you using my money, what is this called legally? Need me to educate you? Unjust enrichment, understand? By the way, forgot to tell you, Jason and I haven't registered the marriage, so that 300,000 is my premarital property. You're holding my money and still so self-righteous, who gave you the face? Liang Jingru? There was silence on the other side. After a long time a message came, "You wait." I'm waiting. Waiting to see what tricks you adulterous pair can pull. I drew the curtains, the city night view outside the terrace was dazzling. And I could finally breathe the air of my own freedom. Jason indeed returned to our wedding house. He sent me a photo. It was the dining table I arranged myself, with his favorite braised pork and a steaming bowl of soup. The caption was, "Wife, I was wrong, come home, I made your favorite dish." The photo was taken warmly, under the dim yellow light, everything seemed so cozy. If it were half a month ago, seeing this photo would have softened my heart completely, and I would have rushed back immediately. But now, I only feel disgusted. He thought a dish could erase everything. He thought I was still that Vivian who would forgive him immediately with a little goodwill. I zoomed in on the photo and saw the phone by his hand. The screen was on, and Celine's avatar on the chat interface was particularly glaring. I could even guess what they were talking about. It was nothing more than Celine complaining that I didn't know how to behave, while Jason was soothing her, telling her, "Honey, don't get upset. I'll just coax that stupid woman Vivian back first. Once we're married, everything she has will be mine." I closed the photo and opened the chat with Ethan. "Mr. Ethan, we can proceed to the second step." "Okay, Miss Vivian." The so-called second step was simple. Just have the scrap collector go to our home and haul away all his things as garbage. As for the furniture, I had already sold it at a low price to the second-hand market through Ethan. The contract was signed in my name, and the money was naturally transferred to my card. Ethan accompanied me. Watching those items I had carefully selected being labeled with cheap tags, I had a moment of daze. Then, I straightened my back, watching them being moved away one by one, with no more ripples in my heart. Seeing my dazed look, he said softly, "Pack up and clear away the past to make room for the future." After saying that, he handed me a bottle of warm water. And my heart warmed. Jason probably never imagined that what he thought was our home was, legally speaking, just a place I rented to him. The down payment for the house was from me. The mortgage was transferred from my card to his every month, then repaid by him. At that time I just thought men need face, and this way he would feel more involved. Thinking back now, I was really overflowing with saintly compassion. I saved face for him, but he threw my face on the ground and stepped on it. The phone rang, it was Jason's mom. I swiped to answer, and before I could speak, her sharp voice pierced through. "Vivian. How can you be so vicious, woman? Where did you throw Jason's things? Those are all brand names. Can you afford to compensate?" I held the phone a bit farther, waited for her to finish roaring, then spoke leisurely. "Auntie, have you forgotten that most of those things were bought by me? Throwing away my own things, is that illegal? You're talking nonsense. Those were bought with money our Jason earned himself." "Oh? Is that so? Did he tell you that his first startup capital came from me selling my dad's heirloom? That his company can operate now is because I subsidize it every month?" The other end instantly went quiet. I could imagine her stunned expression. In their whole family's perception, Jason was the pride of heaven, a young and promising entrepreneurial elite. And I was just an ordinary girl who climbed a high branch. They enjoyed all the conveniences I brought, yet took it for granted that it was all their son's credit. "Auntie, I'm tired, I don't want to play with you anymore. In the future, don't call me again." I hung up, the world was finally quiet. I poured myself a glass of red wine and walked to the terrace. The evening breeze lifted my long hair, carrying a hint of coolness. Looking at the endless traffic below, I suddenly felt that the past 8 years were like a long dream. Now, the dream is over. The next day, I received an unexpected call. It was Jason's friend, the man who questioned him at the bar, Leo. His voice sounded very tired. "Vivian, sorry." I was stunned for a moment. "What do you have to be sorry for?" That day at the bar, I shouldn't have just advised him. Leo's voice carried regret. "I should have told you directly, he's not even human." I was silent. "He even bet with us that no matter what he did, you would cry and go back begging him within 3 days, saying this was your ultimate loyalty test. I didn't blame Leo, he was Jason's friend, not mine. "It's all in the past," I said. "It can't pass," Leo said. "Jason is crazy now. He can't find you and has turned our circle upside down. Last night, he drank too much, went downstairs to Celine's house and caused a scene, and was taken away by the police." I raised an eyebrow. This was beyond my expectations. "What about Celine?" "Celine?" Leo sneered. "She packed the bag Jason gave her and a bunch of things, mailed them to Jason's company, with a note telling him not to harass her anymore. She said she couldn't afford to lose that face. Indeed, Celine's style. An exquisite egoist, never letting herself get into any trouble. Vivian, Jason he. Leo hesitated. He wants to see me, right? I finished for him. Yes. He begged me to contact you no matter what. He said he knows he was wrong and wants to apologize to you in person. Holding the phone, looking at the bright sunshine outside, apologize? If apologies worked, what would police be for? Leo, help me relay a message to him. Go ahead. Tell him to return everything he owes me. Once cleared, I might consider giving him a chance to say sorry in person. After saying that, I hung up. Not long after, my phone received a bank message. 300,000 credited. Transfer, Jason. Immediately after, his call came, with a determined urgency. I didn't answer. He persistently called. Annoyed, I picked up, put it on speaker, and set it aside. Vivian. Vivian, you finally answered my call. Jason's voice carried an irrepressible smugness. I transferred the money to you. That 300,000, I gave it to you. Your anger should be gone now, right? Come back quickly, let's hold the wedding. Vivian, I know you can't leave me, stop fussing. I picked up the nail clipper and leisurely trimmed my nails. Listening to his matter-of-fact tone, my heart had no ripples. Jason. I spoke faintly. He immediately quieted down, like a child waiting for a reward. 300,000 is just the beginning. What do you mean? His voice was full of vigilance. I've made a list for you and sent it to your email. When you clear everything on the list, that's when we talk again. Vivian. Don't go too far. He roared, what exactly do you want? Do you want to ruin me? I don't want anything. I blew the nail clippings off, I just want to take back what belongs to me. These steps weren't for revenge, but to make him realize that everything he prided himself on was built on my sacrifices. As for ruining you? I chuckled lightly, Jason, you're overestimating yourself. You're not worth the effort for me. Hanging up Jason's call, I blocked him completely. In the email, the meticulously prepared message was set for time sending. On the list, every item was recorded clearly. From the market valuation of my dad's ancient painting, to every penny I invested in his company since its founding, to the clothes, watches, and electronics I bought for him over these 8 years. Even including the half I paid extra each time we dined out. The total amount was a number that would make his heart stop upon seeing it. After receiving the email, Jason indeed flew into a rage. He first called me like crazy, and after finding himself blocked, started bombarding Leo. He rushed back to that empty home, like a trapped beast, smashing the remaining doors. Facing his disheveled reflection in the mirror, he roared, Vivian. You bitch. How dare you treat me like this? Leo forwarded his voice message to me. Vivian is crazy. This is extortion. I'm going to sue her. On what basis does she calculate like this? She sold that painting long ago. The company is what I built with my own hard work. Listening to his furious roar, I tossed the phone aside. Of course, I knew he couldn't pay it back. His seemingly glamorous company was just an empty shell. The core technology was bought, clients were pulled in through my connections. Once I pulled the rug out, he would immediately revert to his original form. What I wanted was never the money. What I wanted was for him to see clearly that his pitiful self-esteem and pride were built on such despicable foundations. In the following days, Jason began his death throes. He hired a lawyer to sue me for extortion. But after the lawyer reviewed all the transfer records and receipts I sent, he advised him to think about how to gather the money instead. Unwilling, he went to Celine again. Leo said he blocked her downstairs at her company, begging her for old time's sake to help him. The proud Jason, like a stray dog, humbly begged his goddess in his heart. In the end, Celine called security, and in front of everyone, arm in arm with a man driving a Bentley, threw all the things he gave her in his face. Jason, I never fancied you, I just found it amusing seeing you follow like a lapdog. Now, don't dirty my boyfriend's eyes. Celine's words were recorded by onlookers and spread throughout our entire circle. Jason collapsed on the spot, crying and laughing like a madman. He finally realized that what he thought was love and career were just illusions. That evening, I had just finished working out and returned home when the phone vibrated. It was a message from Ethan, heard from Leo that Jason is emotionally unstable and might come find you, be careful. I just finished business near your home. My heart warmed, and just as I was about to reply, I saw a thin, decadent figure curled up at my door. It was him, Jason. In just half a month, he looked 10 years older. His hair greasy and stuck to his scalp, stubbly beard, sunken eyes. The once crisp brand-name shirt was now wrinkled and stained with unknown dirt. Seeing me, his eyes lit up instantly, like a drowning man grasping the last piece of driftwood. He struggled to stand and lunged towards me. Vivian. I subconsciously stepped back, avoiding his touch. His hand froze in mid-air, the light on his face dimming bit by bit. Vivian, you won't even let me touch you anymore? Looking at him, I spoke calmly, Mr. Jason, are we very familiar? Mr. Jason? He laughed miserably as if hearing the biggest joke. Vivian, you're calling me Mr. Jason? We've been together for 8 years. 8 years. How can you treat me like this? He roared, his voice carrying desperate accusation. I coldly watched him go mad. 8 years? Which 8 years? The 8 years I gave up my guaranteed postgraduate spot for you, accompanying you to this unfamiliar city to struggle? Or the 8 years I sold my dad's heirloom for your company, begging everywhere? Or the 8 years you took my dowry money to buy a bag for your goddess, and bragged to friends that I loved you miserably? With each sentence I said, his face paled a bit more. In the end, he was tottering, as if he could collapse at any moment. No, it's not. Vivian, I was wrong, I really was wrong. With a thud, he knelt before me. A man over 1.8 meters tall, kneeling undignified on the cold floor, hugging my legs, wailing. Seeing his face smeared with snot and tears, my stomach churned, feeling only disgust. Vivian, forgive me, okay? Let's start over, I swear, I'll treat you well from now on, I'll give you my life. Neighbors poked their heads out to watch the spectacle, pointing at us. I tried hard to pull my leg away, but he held on tightly. Jason, let go. I won't let go. Unless you agree. If you don't, I'll kneel here until I die. He acted shamelessly, like a child throwing a tantrum for not getting candy. I laughed in anger. This is the man I loved for 8 years. Selfish, childish, always considering only his own feelings. Just as I was about to call security, a steady figure blocked in front of me. I smelled a faint grassy scent. It was Ethan. He was carrying a fruit basket, obviously having seen my message and come directly. He seemed to have just gotten off work, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing solid forearms. This gentleman, Ethan's voice was calm, yet carried an undeniable force. Please let go of Miss Vivian. Jason lifted his tear-streaked face, saw Ethan, was stunned at first, then erupted in huge anger. Who the fuck are you? I'm talking to my wife, mind your own business. He struggled to stand, but having knelt too long, he stumbled and fell back. That appearance was utterly disheveled. Wife. Ethan chuckled lightly, pulled me behind him, movements swift and firm. His broad shoulders, like a solid wall, completely protected me, isolating Jason and the prying gazes around. Smelling the clean grassy scent on him, my chaotic heartbeat calmed. As far as I know, Miss Vivian is now single. Jason's eyes stared fixedly at the hand Ethan was protecting me with. That look seemed about to spew fire. Vivian. Who is he? You found a new home so quickly? No wonder you're so heartless. Turns out you cuckolded me long ago. His words were vicious and filthy. The neighbors' discussions grew louder. I trembled with anger, about to retort, but Ethan gently pressed my shoulder. The warmth of his palm transmitted through the thin fabric, carrying a soothing power. He looked at Jason, gaze calm and unruffled, yet with a condescending scrutiny. "Mr. Jason, I think you've got a few things wrong. First, Miss Vivian and I are just ordinary friends. Even if not, she's single, who she is with is her freedom. Second, your so-called cuckold is utter nonsense. Who truly betrayed the relationship, you know best in your heart. Third," Ethan paused, his voice cooling, "your current behavior constitutes harassment to Miss Vivian. If you don't leave, I'll call the police." Jason was rendered speechless, his face turning liver-colored. He crawled up from the ground, pointing at me, then at Ethan, lips trembling, unable to say a complete sentence for a long time. You all, fine, Vivian, you're ruthless enough." He threw down this harsh word and stumbled away. That back view was as panicked as a defeated dog. The world was finally quiet. Ethan turned around, his gaze falling on my face. His usually calm eyes were now full of worry and heartache. "Scared?" I shook my head, but my heart felt like it was stuffed with cotton. "Thank you. No need." He handed me the fruit basket. I took it, it was heavy. "How did you know I like mangosteen?" Ethan's gaze flickered for a moment, unnaturally adjusting his glasses. "Before at the supermarket, I saw you picking for a long time and remembered." I remembered, about a month ago, I was in a bad mood, staring at a pile of mangosteens in the supermarket fruit section. It seemed someone pushed a shopping cart past me and paused for a moment. It was him. "Come in and sit for a while first," I said. He hesitated but nodded. This was the first time he entered my home. I poured him a glass of water, we sat on the sofa, momentarily speechless. His gaze swept over my carefully tended terrace, the green plants vibrant in the night. "Your terrace is beautiful," he spoke, his gaze finally landing on me, quiet and focused. "These plants show you're living with heart. Making you laugh." Finally, I spoke first. "No." Ethan looked at me, gaze very serious. "I think you're very brave." My heart trembled lightly. Brave? Only Ethan called me brave. Actually. Looking at the water cup in my hand, I decided to reveal that secret buried deep in my heart. That secret I kept for Jason for 8 years. Also, the last big gift I left for him. Actually, the ancient painting my dad left me, I never sold it. Ethan was stunned, obviously not expecting me to say this suddenly. I raised my head, looking at him, saying word by word. Back then, Jason lacked money for startup and hit walls everywhere. Seeing him so difficult, I lied to him that I sold the painting. In fact, I used another property my mom left me for a mortgage loan. Then used that money, in my personal name, to invest in his company. After I finished, Ethan's pupils contracted sharply. His fingers gripping the water cup tightened, knuckles whitening, the professional calm on his face showed clear cracks for the first time. He looked at me, his Adam's apple bobbing, seeming to want to say something, but choked by immense shock. "So, you're not his creditor." His voice was light, like confirming an incredible fact. "I am his shareholder." Looking at Ethan's shocked face, I continued, "When making this decision, I signed the mortgage contract alone, my hand shaking so much I could barely write my name. I told myself this was the last time. I gave him a chance, and myself an answer. I wanted to see, without my money and resources, whether Jason still loved me, Vivian." I saw the shock in his eyes, and beneath it admiration and heartache. At that moment, I felt an unprecedented ease. "Vivian," he called my name for the first time, not Miss Vivian. "This requires immense courage and wisdom. I admire you greatly." "So, what you sold was your own shares?" I nodded. "Sold to whom?" "His biggest competitor," I said faintly. Ethan drew in a sharp breath, leaned back on the sofa as if to digest the impact of this news. He was smart and immediately understood how lethal this was. Pulling the rug out was nothing more. Does he know?" Ethan's voice was somewhat dry. "He will know soon." I picked up the water cup, took a sip. Share change requires public disclosure. The reason I never told him was to see if he would truly repent when he had nothing. Facts proved I overestimated him. His repentance was cheap and hypocritical. His kneeling was just a performance when cornered. Ethan was silent for a long time, looking at me. The shock in his eyes faded, leaving only admiration and heartache. "Aren't you afraid he?" Ethan didn't continue, but I knew what he meant. Afraid of his revenge? I smiled. "I'm a woman with nothing, he's a stray dog in debt up to his ass, what can he use to revenge me?" Moreover, looking at Ethan, my gaze frank, I'm not alone. Ethan's ear roots reddened visibly. He unnaturally averted his gaze, adjusted his glasses. I just did what I should. Seeing his rare flustered appearance, my mood suddenly improved a lot. The haze of the past 8 years seemed dispelled by sunlight at this moment. The next day, Leo's messages came one after another. "Vivian, the share change is public. Jason is smashing things in the company like crazy. It's over, his biggest client just called to terminate, saying it's the rival of the new shareholder, can't cooperate. The core tech team all ran away, the company is now an empty shell, Jason is completely done." Leo said Jason rushed to the industry summit site, which was once his most glorious stage. He tried to rush the stage but was held back by security, roaring my name and liar in front of countless cameras. Photos of his company bankrupt, surrounded by creditors on the street, kneeling and kowtowing for mercy, became the next day's local finance headline. His life, in just a month, fell from the clouds into the mud. These news were told to me intermittently by Leo. He said Jason's mom's farce was more spectacular. She first ran downstairs to Celine's company, kneeling with snot and tears, begging Celine to show mercy and save her son. In the end, Celine called security to drag her away, and posted a selfie on Facebook with the caption, "Some people's cheapness really opens one's eyes." When one plan failed, his mom sued Jason in court, saying her son cheated her pension money and demanded repayment with interest. Mother and son turned against each other, becoming the biggest joke in the circle. Leo said he hadn't seen Jason for a long time. The last news was that he was sent to a mental hospital. And the most ironic was that last week, the big investor Henry, whom Jason once pestered to attract, happened to visit that hospital. Leo said when Henry saw Jason, he was grabbing a young doctor's white coat, eyes fanatic and scattered, spittle flying on the other's face. "I tell you, my project is worth at least 500 million. As long as Vivian comes back, we can go public immediately." He looked deranged, unaware that one slipper had fallen off his foot. A flash of disdain on Henry's face, he shook his head and quickly left that corridor filled with disinfectant smell. After hanging up, I was watering the gardenias on the terrace. Ethan came over at some point, holding gardening shears, naturally taking the watering can from me. "These few are growing a bit dense, I'll trim them for you." Under the sunlight, his focused profile seemed especially gentle. Our relationship had subtly changed after Jason's disturbance. Once when we cooked together, I got teary from cutting onions, he clumsily brought a wet towel to apply for me. On weekend nights, we nestled on the sofa watching old movies, he remembered I like warm lemon water and prepared it in advance. We didn't spell it out, but both knew. It was a comfortable way of getting along. "What are you thinking?" Ethan put down the gardening shears and asked me. I shook my head, "Nothing, just feel these flowers bloom really well." He smiled, reached out, gently tucked a strand of hair from my temple behind my ear. His fingertips warm, carrying a pleasant grassy scent. My heartbeat skipped a beat. A few months later, I took Ethan to sweep my dad's grave. I placed a copy of the new home's property deed in front of the tombstone. "Dad, I took back everything that belongs to us and found myself. I'm living well now, rest assured." The wind blew, the pines and cypresses in front of the tombstone rustled, as if responding to me. Ethan stood quietly beside me, like a silent and reliable tree. That night, the gardenia fragrance on the terrace grew denser. Ethan flipped skewers on the grill, charcoal fire reflecting his profile, gentle and focused. I walked over with 2 glasses of red wine. Hard work, Ethan. He took the glass, his fingertip inadvertently brushing my hand back, the warm touch making my heart jump. Cheers to new life. He raised his glass, the city's myriad lights reflected in his eyes, and me too. I clinked with him. Ethan looked at me, the gentleness in his eyes almost overflowing. To your bravery, he paused, voice low and serious, and to our future. Looking at the gentle smile in his eyes, I felt an unprecedented peace. Vivian, he put down the glass, looking at me seriously, I like you, I hope your future includes me. Those scars were still there, but no longer painful. I tiptoed, gently imprinting a kiss on his lips. My future welcomes you. A year later, Ethan and I's wedding was simple and warm. During the honeymoon trip, I received a forwarded letter, postmarked from a suburban mental hospital. The letter paper had familiar chaotic handwriting, full of my name and incoherent I was wrong. At the end of the letter, a misshapen bag was drawn. I handed the letter to Ethan beside me, he glanced at it, crumpled it into a ball, and accurately threw it into a distant trash bin. Don't let garbage dirty our scenery. He smiled and held my hand, sunlight falling on our interlaced fingers. Yes, my future has no more garbage.